General Counsel for ETS EMEA. I've been working with the company for almost 2 decades now, and I started as a legal counsel, and of course the legal profession is always evolving. I moved to data protection, then data strategy, and of course everything that is about data interests me, and that's what brought me to AI and AI governance. So the balance between regulation and innovation, I think this is a false dichotomy. We've been telling this thing that regulation kills innovation, but it's actually not the case. Regulation is needed to organize ourselves. We've had it for centuries, and it has worked in many other industries. In AI in education, I think it's very important that we take care of, especially of our most vulnerable students, the younger learners, and to make sure that the AI solutions that we implement with EdTech are really helping our young students and also, of course, adult learners to improve their learning and to help them grow their critical skills, not to minimize them. So we need to take a different approach in terms of regulation and innovation. This is not one or the other. We can definitely work together with both. The EU AI Act is the first general regulation on AI. There are many regulations on AI on different topics, on different industries, in different areas. But this has received more attention because it's the first one that is general. In terms of the education, what it will bring is more care for how we implement this technology when it's about education. It doesn't mean that it will not be able to be used. Of course, we will be able to be used, but it depends how it will be used on an educational setting. For example, one thing that is clearly forbidden by the EU AI Act is the emotion recognition in education setting. It is also in the workplace, but in this case, our topic is education, and it means that we will not be allowed to use emotional recognition, and that means using biometric data. For example, how the student reacts, or if the student moves in a certain way, or how his face changes depending on the question. So this biometric data to detect emotions, to give an output on an educational setting is not going to be allowed. So this is just an example of a clear prohibition from the EU AI Act. However, it doesn't mean that we cannot use AI in many other areas. Of course we can, but when we are speaking about sensitive data of the students or the learners, this is where it becomes more critical to be very careful. And there are certain things that are prohibited, like I mentioned, the emotional recognition. There are things that need more care and more documentation in order to implement it. And there are things that are possible to implement. So let's not throw a white blanket and say, oh, we cannot use AI in educational settings. Yes, we can. We just need to be concise and careful on what are we talking about. Applying ethical principles when developing AI solutions is a very wide and broad topic. We speak about ethics by design or ethical principles by design. I think it means really to look at the human, designing the solutions, having the human at the center of that design. Of course, we can speak very long about ethic principles and how you can make them into a system and implement them. But some startups that have limited resources, that have smaller teams, that they don't have like a big infrastructure to have an ethicist and the technologists and everyone designing these things, what they need to take into account when designing and not having all this human and capital to implement different processes and checks, etc., is really think about the person that is going to interact with the system, and if there is anything in the process of the output, or in the future, if that output can evolve in a way that can harm that person, then something needs to change. So we can really simplify this ethical question to just keeping in mind how the person is going to interact with the system and is there any harm that can be done to this person. Education policies depend on each country's ministries, right? So it's a very political thing. I don't know if in the EU, at least in Europe, the countries will reach an agreement for a standardized policy or regulation for education. The good news is, at a minimum, we have the AI Act that considers the education area as a high-risk area. So AI developers need to be more careful on developing systems that will be deployed on an educational setting. Regulation as such, I don't know, but I do believe that we need to be very careful on how we let our children interact with the different AI systems. I'm a mother of 3, and I can see already the difference between my kids on how they interact. The oldest is 15, and she doesn't want to interact with it at all. She thinks that it's like cheating, and my youngest wants to speak to a chatbot all the time. So as parents, as educators, we need to be careful that these systems don't hinder their critical thinking. I don't think privacy will become a luxury in educational solutions, because at least in Europe we have the GDPR, and our privacy is more protected and respected than in other parts of the world. I think it's important that we don't willingly give up this right. Of course, there are breaches all the time, but we should not give away this right that we have, and especially when it's about our youngest learners. As a member of the advisory board of AI4ALL, I see involvement of the youth and the new generation in the systems as critical. We need to bring them, or should I say, maybe they are the ones pushing us to have a more balanced technology. Until now, we've seen how big companies have developed amazing solutions, but without taking into account certain rights like data privacy or climate, or sometimes labor laws or intellectual property. And I'm really hopeful that the younger generation will not accept this type of business models. In AI4ALL, we have a very active approach in bringing the youth on this journey. And it's precisely this Saturday we have a workshop where we are going to bring teenagers from 12 until 18 years old to work with AI in a critical way. So it's as I said, I think is one of the most important work we can do, not only in AI4ALL, but in general, with our kids, with our students, etc. To use AI responsibly, we need to be asking ourselves, do I really need to ask an AI for this information? What is the impact of me asking this on ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity, regardless of the tool? What is the impact of this question on the environment, for example, or on the amount of data that this is going to require to train a new model? We speak a lot about responsible AI, and sometimes we also need to ask if we are responsible in using AI. So it's a two-sided question, right? So let's be critical on our own usage of the technology and use it when it can really bring value, and not just to for being more comfortable or faster. Or the way I imagine the school of the future and how AI is going to take a role in this is by having a personalized support. And of course, when you have something that is personalized, it means that you've given this system or model your information, right? Otherwise, so, and in this exchange of my personal data to my personalized support, we need to be very careful that this exchange of data stays here and is not sent somewhere else, or that it can be used to harm the student. So that is one part, and that this personalization can really, really help the student and the learner, because we cannot assess the same way a kid that has a strength in creativity or in dance or in music with a kid that has a strength on math, or a kid that has dyslexia with a kid that doesn't have dyslexia. So this personalization can really benefit individually that kid, but as a collective, in this school, in my dreams, it will bring these kids or these learners together and not apart. My fear is that these personalized tutors or personalized agents are going to keep us in our own bubble and apart from others. So this is what I don't want to see.